Right, let's get started with round 2. I think all the teams should have had plenty of time to prepare. Our first match will be Team 3, Lincoln's Inn, versus Team 6, Lincoln's Inn. So Team 3 on my right will be arguing for the motion, and Team 6 on my left will be arguing against the motion. And that motion is that this House believes that in light of the Security Council's response to the situation in Syria, the Council has become irrelevant in maintaining international peace and security. Team 3, your first speaker, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am arguing in support of this proposition. I would like to make 3 fundamental points. The first point is that intervention is a crucial consideration when assessing the relevance of the UN Security Council. The second point is that funding represents a considerable problem. And the final point is that reform is counterproductive, if not impossible. In relation to the first point, intervention is surely a very delicate matter, and one that is fated to bring widespread political pressures. However, Chapter 7 is truly what distinguishes the UN Security Council from any other international agent, which deals with international negotiations. And we can't deny that there's been a move towards a more liberal approach to intervention under the flag of human rights. And therefore, maintaining the status quo really doesn't represent a valid excuse anymore for the Council. The Council is expensive. There's been an increase of 72% in the peacekeeping budget. Hundreds of billions are spent on a legal construct which is entirely deadlocked. Finally, reform is counterproductive. How would we reform such a system? Would we remove the veto and therefore provide an incentive for a constant intervention? Would we expand the membership? That would just make the process extremely lengthy and very hard to manage. Should we take inspiration from the UN create a rotary system? That wouldn't work because it would create considerable political pressures. On this point, I would like to support this proposition. Thank you.
And before I turn to deal with my own points, I propose to raise 2 issues by way of rebuttal. Firstly, what we heard from the other side was that the UN Security Council loses its value because it's too expensive. Now, we say that would be correct if the UN Council had no effect and no value, but that's not the case. And second, we were told that reforms to it are impossible. As a matter of legality and as a matter of procedure, this is completely incorrect, and it's something that we don't propose to linger on further. So to turn to our own points, first we say that the Council loses its legitimacy or its purpose when it becomes irrelevant. And it becomes irrelevant when it's no longer following a particular goal or a particular aim of justice. That's not the case. Even if the Council isn't the most effective piece of machinery, that doesn't mean that the mere fact it's there to serve a goal, that is the gatekeeping of justice, lends itself some value just in and of itself. Second, we say that the most important function that the Security Council has is to exist as a checking mechanism. It's important in the same way as the House of Lords has consultation committees. In themselves, they're not able to put forward, to pass law or to put forward a proposal which must go through, but because of who these committees are comprised of, it lends a certain persuasive value to what their opinions are. And we say that in the same vein as the House of Lords, so too is the Security Council comprised of people whose views are worth listening to. The mere fact that a resolution is not the greatest penal sanction does not mean that it has no value at all. And in this respect, we would cite the mere aim of diplomacy, a party may choose not to follow a particular resolution. Sorry, that does end my submissions, regrettably. Thank you.
Good evening. I am in support that the Council has become irrelevant in maintaining international peace and security, and my arguments in particular relate to the veto powers. My first argument is in regards to the inequality during negotiation and decision-making process, and my second argument is that no one nation should hold that much power, which makes the Council irrelevant in maintaining peace and security. In relation to my first argument, the powerful five nations provide their national interests first. They see the world through their own prism of interest and no others. So they apply the veto powers for themselves and not the international community. And this veto power essentially is like chess players playing against the master of chess. It can be lost, and they're playing for their own goodwill essentially and for their own economic efficiency. So moving on to my second point now, that no one nation should hold so much power. The Security Council should not be holding the interest of any one nation as such, because when these nations' interests collide, the system becomes a standstill. These are not the interests of the world at large and are the interests of the five powerful nations that have the veto powers. They are abused to the shield states, there's criticism for military action, and they even there's humanitarian crime as well that's going on with these veto powers, which are being allowed, and therefore that's what's making the Security Council irrelevant in maintaining peace and security, and this can be seen from the example of what's happening in Syria at the moment. So essentially immunity is being given to the powerful five nations, and this should not be the case, and it's frankly ridiculous, and that's the reasons why I support that the Council has become irrelevant in maintaining peace and security. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I act for the opposition, and I oppose the motion that the Security Council has become irrelevant. May I first deal with some rebuttals? My friend here suggested that there is inequality, the fact that the powerful five have, or permanent members have the right to veto. Well, if you actually look at who the permanent five are, there is a check and balance within that. On the one hand, we have the USA, UK and France, and on the other we have China and Russia. I think the difference in these two countries, where they come from and their democratic, or not always democratic, their political views create a balance within the powerful five. I shall move on to the arguments I'd like to put forward. Primarily, the Security Council is, of course, criticised for being slow. The crisis in Syria was ongoing since 2011, and it has indeed taken 2 years for them to act. However, within this time, there has been consultations with the UN Arab League nation, and you may suggest that they actually have a more accurate perspective on the situation. The consultations that go back and forth may give us a more accurate picture about how to go about the situation. And I would like to add to that there are humanitarian concerns, and might is not always right in the situation. Perhaps the fact that they've had time to consider their position means that they may have a more reasoned approach and a more tactical approach of going about the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes my speech, and I hope you agree with me. Thank you.
I would like to deal essentially with two main points. It was argued by the proposition that a reform is impossible. This has been rebutted. It's been said that, in fact, legally speaking, it is possible. And in fact, reform is probably one of the most frequently seen and discussed aspects of the law itself. However, are we only concerned with the legality of the UN Security Council? Are we more concerned with the practical effect of its unworkability, or of its being completely deadlocked exactly because so much attention is put on the legal aspect of it? So a reform probably is procedurally possible, but in practical terms, I haven't heard proposals as to what that sort of reform could be. And the other point is that there is inequality, indeed, and it's an inequality that cannot be solved for the simple reason that expanding membership would simply not resolve the problem. Thank you.
In closing, I would make only 3 brief points. The first being that we were criticised for not proposing new reforms to the Security Council. The reason I did not engage with that aspect of the debate is because we say, as it stands, it's fit for purpose and is not in need of reform. Second, the veto argument was picked upon to say the Security Council acts only in the sole interest of the 5 powerful parties and does not reflect the view of world order. Now, we say this is also incorrect. The Security Council's primary function is there to act as a gatekeeper to world peace. This surely must be in the interest of all countries, whether privy and party to the Security Council or outside of it, and I don't propose that the honourable members contended otherwise. And third, we say that the view is in fact a balanced one. Whilst it's often the case that the 5 most powerful members are concentrated on, there are also 10 other members who rotate on a 2-year basis, and those are comprised of some of the most powerful countries in the world who do in fact bring their opinions to bear.
Some excellent points from both sides. The judges will now tally up their scores, and then we'll move on to the second match of this round. Thanks, guys.